in 1922.
Harlem, New York. A smoky back room. A 15-year-old boy stands in front of a woman twice his age. His hands are shaking. Not from fear of the cops, not from fear of rival gangs, but from fear of her. Her name is Stephanie St. Clair, and she's about to change his life forever. "You think you're tough?" she asks, lighting a cigarette. The boy tries to look confident. "Yes, ma'am." "You think because you fought some kids in South Carolina, you're ready for Harlem? I can handle myself." Stephanie laughs. It's not a kind laugh. It's the laugh of someone who has seen 1,000 tough guys come and go. "Boy, Harlem will eat you alive. You're 15 years old. You got anger in your eyes and nothing in your pockets. You want to survive here. You need to learn 3 things: power, strategy, and patience. Who's going to teach me?" the boy asks. Stephanie St. Clair leans forward. Her eyes are cold, calculating. The eyes of someone who built an empire from nothing. "I am," she says. "And if you're smart, you'll listen. If you're not, you'll be dead in 6 months." The boy nods. "I'll listen." "Good. What's your name?" "Ellsworth, but everyone calls me Bumpy." Stephanie smiles. "Bumpy Johnson. I'm going to make you a king, but first, you're going to learn how to serve a queen." That day, Bumpy Johnson met the only person he would ever bow to, the only person he would ever fear, the only person who could make him do anything she wanted with just a look. Her name was Stephanie St. Clair, and this is her story. The story that Hollywood never told you. The story of the woman who built Harlem before Bumpy Johnson, the woman who taught him everything he knew, the woman who made him the legend he became. This is the story of the Queen of Harlem, and why, for 40 years, Bumpy Johnson never made a single major decision without asking her permission first. Martinique, Caribbean. Stephanie St. Clair was born into poverty. Her father was a sailor. Her mother was a seamstress. They had nothing, but Stephanie had something that money couldn't buy: intelligence, ruthlessness, and a refusal to accept the life society told her she deserved. When she was 14 years old, her father died at sea. Her mother couldn't afford to feed her, so Stephanie did what thousands of Caribbean immigrants did in the early 1900s. She got on a boat to America. She arrived in New York in 1912. She was 15 years old. She spoke broken English. She had $10 in her pocket. Most immigrant girls in her situation ended up in factories, or worse. But Stephanie St. Clair wasn't most girls. Within 6 months, she had learned English. Within a year, she had a job managing a boarding house. Within 2 years, she had saved enough money to buy her own property. And within 5 years, she had discovered the business that would make her a legend: the numbers racket. In the 1920s, Harlem was exploding. The Great Migration had brought hundreds of thousands of black people from the South to the North. They were looking for work, looking for opportunity, looking for a better life, and they were looking for hope. The numbers racket was simple. You picked a 3-digit number. You bet anywhere from a penny to $1, and if your number hit, you won big. Maybe 50 times your bet, maybe 100 times. For poor people in Harlem, it was a dream. A chance to turn a quarter into $25. A chance to pay rent, feed your family, escape poverty. And Stephanie St. Clair saw the opportunity. She started small, taking bets in her boarding house, paying out winners, building trust. But Stephanie didn't just run a numbers game. She revolutionized it. She kept meticulous records. She paid winners immediately. She never cheated. And most importantly, she protected her customers from the police and from rival operators. Within 3 years, Stephanie St. Clair was running the largest numbers operation in Harlem. She had 40 employees. She was making $10,000 a week. In 1920s money, that's equivalent to over $150,000 a week today. By 1922, Stephanie St. Clair wasn't just rich, she was powerful. She had cops on her payroll, judges in her pocket, politicians who owed her favors. She was 30 years old, and she was the most powerful woman in Harlem. But she had a problem. The Italian Mafia wanted her territory, and they weren't asking nicely. Harlem. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was 15 years old when he arrived in Harlem. He had just fled South Carolina after getting into a fight that almost killed someone. He had nothing, no money, no connections, no family. He was sleeping in alleyways, stealing food, fighting anyone who looked at him wrong. He was angry, violent, reckless. He was also smart, observant, and desperate to prove himself. One night, Bumpy got into a fight outside Stephanie St. Clair's headquarters. 3 older boys were trying to rob him. Bumpy fought back hard. Stephanie heard the commotion. She looked out the window. She saw a skinny 15-year-old kid holding his own against 3 men twice his size. "Bring him inside," she told her bodyguard. When Bumpy walked into Stephanie's office, he expected to be kicked out, or arrested, or worse. Instead, Stephanie offered him a job. "You got fire," she said. "But fire without direction just burns everything down. You want to survive in Harlem? You need to learn control. Why would you help me?" Bumpy asked. "Because I see potential, and because I need people who aren't afraid to fight. But I need people who know when to fight. Can you learn that?" Bumpy nodded. "Good. You work for me now. You'll run numbers. You'll collect debts. You'll protect my operations. And in exchange, I'll teach you how this city really works." For the next 10 years, Bumpy Johnson became Stephanie St. Clair's protege, her enforcer, her strategist, her most loyal soldier. She taught him everything: how to read people, how to build alliances, how to use violence strategically, not emotionally, how to think 3 steps ahead, how to turn enemies into allies, how to survive in a world that wanted to destroy both of them. But most importantly, she taught him one lesson that he would never forget. Power, Stephanie told him one night, doesn't come from being the strongest. It comes from being the smartest. The Italian Mafia has more men than us, more guns, more money, but they don't have what we have. "What's that?" Bumpy asked. "Loyalty, community, strategy. We protect our people, they exploit theirs, and in the long run, that's what wins." Bumpy never forgot that lesson, and for the rest of his life, whenever he faced a difficult decision, he would think, what would Madame Queen do? Because that's what everyone in Harlem called Stephanie St. Clair, Madame Queen, the Queen of Harlem, the woman who could make or break anyone in the neighborhood, including Bumpy Johnson. Harlem. The Italian Mafia was tired of asking nicely. They wanted Harlem's numbers racket, and they were willing to kill for it. Dutch Schultz, one of the most violent mobsters in New York, sent a message to Stephanie St. Clair. "You have 2 choices, work for me, or die." Stephanie's response was legendary. She walked into Dutch Schultz's headquarters in Manhattan, alone, unarmed. Dutch's men were shocked. "Lady, you got a death wish. I'm here to see Dutch," she said calmly. They brought her to his office. Dutch was sitting behind his desk, counting money. "Stephanie St. Clair," he said with a smile, "you're either very brave or very stupid." "I'm neither," Stephanie said. "I'm here to tell you something. You think you can take Harlem? Go ahead, try, but you're going to lose." Dutch laughed. "I got 100 men. I got connections to every family in New York. What do you got?" "I have Harlem," Stephanie said. "I have the community. I have their trust. You come into my neighborhood and try to take over. They'll fight you. Every block, every building, every person. You'll spend more money trying to control Harlem than you'll ever make from it." Dutch stopped smiling. "And even if you win," Stephanie continued, "you'll never have what I have. Loyalty. You rule through fear. I rule through respect. And respect lasts longer than fear." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Dutch, if anything happens to me, I've left instructions. Every newspaper in New York gets a file with information about your operations, your bribes, your murders, everything. You'll be in jail within a week." She walked out. Dutch Schultz stared at the door. He had just been threatened by a woman half his size, and he knew she meant every word. For the next 2 years, Dutch Schultz tried to take over Harlem. He sent enforcers. He bribed cops. He threatened business owners. But Stephanie St. Clair fought back, and she had something Dutch didn't. She had Bumpy Johnson, By 1930, Bumpy was 23 years old. He was 6 feet tall, 200 pounds of muscle, and he was the most feared enforcer in Harlem. But it wasn't just muscle. Stephanie had taught him to think, to strategize, to outmaneuver. Every time Dutch sent men into Harlem, Bumpy was waiting, not with violence, with strategy. He would follow Dutch's men, learn their routines, find their weaknesses, and then strike when they least expected it. He didn't kill them. That would start a war. Instead, he embarrassed them, made them look weak, made them fear coming back. And it worked. By 1931, Dutch Schultz was losing money trying to take over Harlem. His men were afraid, his investors were angry, and Stephanie St. Clair was still the queen of Harlem. But the war wasn't over, it was just beginning. New York's Stephanie St. Clair was arrested, not for running numbers, but for shooting a man who tried to assault her. She claimed the man claimed she attacked him. The court sided with the man. Stephanie St. Clair was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The night before she went to prison, she called Bumpy Johnson to her apartment. "They're putting me away," she said, "for 10 years, maybe more." Bumpy's jaw clenched. "We can fight this. We can." "No," Stephanie interrupted. "I'm going to prison, and while I'm gone, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to protect what we built. The Italian Mafia is going to try to take over the moment I'm gone. They think without me, Harlem will fall. Prove them wrong." "I will," Bumpy promised. "And Bumpy, don't become like them. Don't let anger control you. Stay smart. Stay strategic. Be the man I taught you to be." Bumpy nodded. "I promise, Madame Queen." Stephanie smiled. It was the first time Bumpy had ever seen her smile with genuine warmth. "You're going to be great, Bumpy. Greater than me. But never forget where you came from. Never forget who taught you. And never forget that Harlem belongs to its people, not to us. We just protect it." The next day, Stephanie St. Clair went to prison, and Bumpy Johnson became the protector of Harlem. For the next 8 years, while Stephanie was locked up, Bumpy fought to keep Harlem independent. He fought Dutch Schultz. He fought Lucky Luciano. He fought corrupt cops and politicians, and he won. Not every battle, but enough to keep Harlem free. He did it for Stephanie, because she had believed in him when no one else did, because she had taught him everything, because he owed her his life. Every month, Bumpy visited Stephanie in prison. He updated her on Harlem, asked for her advice, followed her instructions. Even from behind bars, Stephanie St. Clair was still the queen of Harlem, and Bumpy Johnson was still her loyal soldier. Harlem. Stephanie St. Clair was released from prison after 8 years. She was 43 years old. The world had changed. Harlem had changed, but one thing hadn't changed: Bumpy Johnson's loyalty. The day Stephanie walked out of prison, Bumpy was waiting. He had a car, a driver, and an envelope. "Welcome home, Madame Queen," Bumpy said. Stephanie opened the envelope. Inside was $10,000. "What's this?" she asked. "Your share," Bumpy said. "Every year you were in prison, I set aside part of the profits. It's yours." Stephanie stared at him. In 8 years, Bumpy could have taken everything, built his own empire, forgotten about her, but he hadn't. "He didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Bumpy replied. "You taught me loyalty, you taught me honor, and you taught me that Harlem takes care of its own." Stephanie smiled. "You've become everything I hoped you would be." For the next 28 years, until Stephanie St. Clair's death in 1968, Bumpy Johnson continued to consult with her on every major decision. When he went to war with the Italian Mafia, he asked Stephanie for advice. When he built alliances with other crime families, he asked Stephanie for approval. When he decided to protect Harlem from drug dealers, he asked Stephanie if it was the right move. And Stephanie always gave him the same advice: protect the community, stay smart, never let anger control you. Even when Bumpy became the most powerful man in Harlem, he never forgot who taught him. He never forgot who made him. He never forgot the woman who had given a 15-year-old kid a chance. Harlem. Stephanie St. Clair was released from prison after 8 years. She was 43 years old. The world had changed. Harlem had changed, but one thing hadn't changed: Bumpy Johnson's loyalty. The day Stephanie walked out of prison, Bumpy was waiting. He had a car, a driver, and an envelope. "Welcome home, Madame Queen," Bumpy said. Stephanie opened the envelope. Inside was $10,000. "What's this?" she asked. "Your share," Bumpy said. "Every year you were in prison, I set aside part of the profits. It's yours." Stephanie stared at him. In 8 years, Bumpy could have taken everything, built his own empire, forgotten about her, but he hadn't. "He didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Bumpy replied. "You taught me loyalty, you taught me honor, and you taught me that Harlem takes care of its own." Stephanie smiled. "You've become everything I hoped you would be." For the next 28 years, until Stephanie St. Clair's death in 1968, Bumpy Johnson continued to consult with her on every major decision. When he went to war with the Italian Mafia, he asked Stephanie for advice. When he built alliances with other crime families, he asked Stephanie for approval. When he decided to protect Harlem from drug dealers, he asked Stephanie if it was the right move. And Stephanie always gave him the same advice: protect the community, stay smart, never let anger control you. Even when Bumpy became the most powerful man in Harlem, he never forgot who taught him. He never forgot who made him. He never forgot the woman who had given a 15-year-old kid a chance. Asterisk. Throughout his life, there were only a handful of times when Bumpy Johnson bowed to anyone, and every single time it was to Stephanie St. Clair. Asterisk. Bumpy wanted to expand into New Jersey. It was a lucrative opportunity, millions of dollars in potential profit. But Stephanie said no. Bumpy asked, frustrated, "Because you'll stretch yourself too thin." Stephanie explained, "You control Harlem because you're here. You know every street, every person, every problem. You go to New Jersey, you lose focus. And the moment you lose focus, someone will take Harlem from you." Bumpy wanted to argue, but he didn't, because Stephanie had never been wrong. He stayed in Harlem, and 2 years later, the man who tried to expand into New Jersey was killed by the very people he tried to control. Stephanie had been right. Asterisk. A rival gang killed one of Bumpy's men. Bumpy wanted revenge. Immediate, violent revenge. He went to Stephanie's apartment with a gun in his hand. "I'm going to make them pay," he told her. Stephanie looked at the gun, then at Bumpy. "And then what?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "You kill them. They kill more of your men. You kill more of theirs. It never ends. You want revenge? Fine, but be smart about it. Make them regret it without starting a war that destroys everything we built." Bumpy put the gun down. 3 weeks later, Bumpy used economic pressure to shut down the rival gang's operations. No violence, no war, just strategy. Stephanie had been right again. Asterisk. Bumpy had a chance to make a deal with the Genovese family, a deal that would make him richer than ever, but it required allowing drugs into Harlem. Bumpy was tempted. The money was incredible. He went to Stephanie. "What should I do?" he asked. "You already know the answer," Stephanie said. "But the money will destroy Harlem," Stephanie interrupted. "You want to be rich, or you want to protect your community. You can't do both." Bumpy thought about it for 3 days. Then he turned down the deal. It cost him millions, but it saved Harlem from the heroin epidemic that destroyed other neighborhoods. Stephanie had been right one more time. March 1969. Harlem. Stephanie St. Clair died at the age of 72. She had lived through Jim Crow, the Great Migration, 2 world wars, the Civil Rights Movement. She had built an empire, fought the mafia, survived prison, and mentored the man who would become the Godfather of Harlem. Her funeral was attended by over 2,000 people, politicians, criminals, business owners, community leaders, people from every walk of life. But the person who mourned her most was Bumpy Johnson. He stood at her grave for 2 hours after everyone else had left. He didn't cry. He just stood there, remembering the 15-year-old kid she had believed in, the lessons she had taught him, The woman who had made him everything he became. "I wouldn't be here without you," he whispered. "Everything I am, everything I built, it's because of you." 6 months later, Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack. He was 62 years old. Some people say he died of natural causes. Others say he died of a broken heart. That without Stephanie St. Clair to guide him, he lost his purpose. But everyone in Harlem knew the truth. Bumpy Johnson was the king of Harlem, but he was a king who served a queen who taught him that real power comes from protecting your community, not exploiting it. A queen who showed him that intelligence beats violence, that strategy beats strength, that loyalty beats everything. Her name was Stephanie St. Clair, and she was the only person Bumpy Johnson ever feared, ever respected, ever bowed to. Asterisk today, when people talk about Harlem in the 1920s through 1960s, they talk about Bumpy Johnson, the TV shows, the movies, the legend, but they rarely talk about Stephanie St. Clair. Hollywood has made a dozen movies about male gangsters, but almost none about the woman who built the empire before them. Why? Because Stephanie St. Clair's story doesn't fit the narrative. She wasn't a violent gangster. She was a strategic businesswoman. She didn't rule through fear. She ruled through intelligence. She was a black woman, an immigrant, a former prisoner, someone society said should have nothing. But she built an empire. She fought the mafia and won. She mentored the most powerful man in Harlem, and she did it all without firing a single bullet. Her legacy lives on in every lesson she taught Bumpy Johnson, in every decision he made based on her advice, in every time he chose strategy over violence, community over profit, loyalty over greed. Bumpy Johnson became a legend, but he became that legend because Stephanie St. Clair made him one. She was the teacher, he was the student, she was the queen, he was the king. And for 40 years, from 1922 until her death in 1969, Bumpy Johnson never made a major decision without asking himself one question: what would Madam Queen do? That's the power of Stephanie St. Clair. That's the legacy of the Queen of Harlem. That's the story Hollywood doesn't want to tell. But it's the story that matters most, because it shows that real power doesn't come from violence or fear. It comes from intelligence, strategy, and loyalty. Stephanie St. Clair proved that, and she taught Bumpy Johnson to prove it too. This is the untold story of the woman who made Bumpy Johnson, the woman who built Harlem, the woman who showed that a black immigrant woman with nothing could become more powerful than the entire Italian Mafia. Her name was Stephanie St. Clair, and she was the only woman Bumpy Johnson ever feared. Subscribe to Black Ledger for more untold stories, more hidden legends, more truth, because the real history is always more powerful than the Hollywood version. Thank you for watching. Asterisk.